When I heard the distressed cries of my mother, I immediately thought our pesky neighbor's cat had invaded her beloved garden once more. But as I stepped out of my room, I was met with a scene that left me struggling to comprehend. My mother seemed on the brink of fainting, and my own heart raced uncontrollably. At first, I thought I was being deceived by some phantom or illusion, but the sight before me was unmistakably real. There on our porch stood my sister, absent from our lives for half a decade. Zoe had been only 2 when she vanished. She had been with my father on that fateful day, but when he returned, he was alone, claiming she had been abducted. According to him, he'd only left her briefly in the car to grab some candy, but upon his return, she was gone. Yet now, years later, she was here. After endless months of searching, fading hopes, and a closed case, she stood before us. Rumors circulated in whispers. Some believed she was lost forever, while others imagined unspeakable fates for her. My mother, devastated by the loss, could not forgive my father, and they parted ways. In the aftermath, he seemed to move on easily, remarrying and flaunting newfound wealth with a grand house, the origins of which were a mystery. On the other hand, my mother was haunted daily by her absence. Her grief was palpable, and she'd sometimes even mistake me for Zoe. The period that followed was one of immense grief and pain, watching my mother spiral into a world of her own. Her behavior began to change drastically. Every day, like clockwork, she would tune into the news, eyes scanning for any mention of children found or stories that resonated with ours. Old photo albums were reopened, and my sister's pictures now adorned every corner of our home, from the living room and kitchen to our individual bedrooms. She held on to a glimmer of hope, frequently expressing a deep-seated belief that my sister would return. She would often say she had a feeling that the news would one day bear tidings of Zoe's return. The lines between reality and her anxieties blurred when she heard of a child trafficking gang being apprehended. This news shook her to the core. She became so protective that it bordered on suffocation. She left her job, and the outside world became forbidden territory. I wasn't allowed to leave the confines of our home, even for school. The ring of the phone went unanswered, windows were latched, and doors bolted. While there were stories of families being reunited after a year of separation, we were grappling with a 5-year void. The weight of my mother's fears bore down heavily on me. Her dread of another potential loss, of me getting abducted, was stifling. I empathized with her anguish and loss, but the chains of her fear were becoming unbearable for me. All I craved was a semblance of normalcy, an opportunity to experience teenage joys like my peers. Was that too much to yearn for? Audrey, one of my close friends, was throwing a party. It was the talk of our circle, and my heart yearned to be a part of it. No matter how much I pleaded with my mother, she stood firm in her decision. So in a fit of rebellion, I devised a plan and sneaked out. Pretending to sleep, I strategically placed pillows under my blanket, giving the illusion of my slumbering form beneath it. As I stepped into the party, a mix of anxiety and excitement filled me. But just as I was starting to enjoy, my heart sank. An hour in, there stood my mother, anger and disappointment evident on her face. The mood of the party shifted as everyone stared, some whispering behind hands and others more audibly commenting on her protective extremes. The ride home was filled with her reproaches. At the height of my frustration, I confronted her. "Can't you see? You've trapped me in this gilded cage. I need to live, to breathe. If you continue this, you might lose me forever." Instead of understanding, she resorted to her familiar action, locking the door behind her and sealing me inside. The fallout of that night was swift. The grapevine buzzed with rumors about me, the most absurd being a fictitious affair with an older man, only to be caught by the police. Since that incident, the confines of my home became even more restrictive, and my mother tightened her grip, further alienating me from the world outside. Can you fathom the depths of my despair? If only Zoe had never vanished, my life wouldn't have spiraled into this chaos. And just when I thought things couldn't plummet further, I felt the weight of isolation. On one side was my mother, who seemed to have lost her grip on reality, and on the other, my distant father, enmeshed in his new life. Our relationship was a mere shadow, limited to fleeting moments during Christmas. An hour over hot chocolate in a cozy cafe, a gift handed over, and he would vanish again until the following year. In my desperation, I considered seeking refuge with him, hoping for an escape from the suffocating atmosphere at home. You might judge me for sounding self-centered or lacking compassion, but understand my plight. My mother, once my rock, was crumbling. Her mental state was a genuine concern. Taking the gamble, I made the rash decision to escape through my bedroom window. I hadn't anticipated the height, resulting in a painful landing and an injured leg. Despite the overwhelming darkness, I mustered the courage to hobble the 3 blocks to my father's house. The eeriness of the night, coupled with the weight of my mother's fears, played tricks on my mind. Every passing car seemed a potential threat, every shadow a lurking danger. You're probably shaking your head in disbelief, right? The fear and paranoia that had seeped into me was courtesy of my mother's obsessive warnings, and I found, much to my dismay, that she had been successful in embedding them deep within me. Yet, arriving at my father's house brought forth a new set of worries. My stepmother, her face devoid of any warmth, left me out in the chilling cold, waiting endlessly for my father. Hope briefly sparked when he finally arrived, but it was quickly doused. His anger-filled rant, instead of empathy or curiosity about my unexpected visit, left me feeling more alone than ever. To add insult to injury, he insinuated that I could potentially bring legal trouble to his doorstep. The very idea was ludicrous. Why would his own daughter's presence make him a suspect in any wrongdoing? Yet the unexpected occurred. Before he could usher me back home, police sirens wailed and their flashing lights spanned the street. Officers emerged, handcuffing my bewildered father, and the night transformed into an even darker, more twisted reality. The following hours blurred as I found myself in the sterile confines of the police station, facing a barrage of questions. They seemed less interested in my recent escape and more fixated on an unexpected line of inquiry: my sister's disappearance. How was Zoe's vanishing tied to my desperate plea for a more normal life? The chilling experience at the police station made me yearn for the safety of my home, something I hadn't felt in a while. When my mother arrived to retrieve me the next day, her eyes, red from tears, darted away from mine. Instead of answers, all I received was an embrace so tight it was as if she was trying to meld our souls together. "I couldn't bear losing you too," she whispered. I had initially assumed that my mother's protective instincts had caused her to report my absence, subsequently implicating my father. It seemed fitting, given how he had treated me. But as she tearfully clarified, she hadn't even been aware of my midnight escape until the police informed her. As days turned into a week, a strange reversal of roles occurred. My mother granted me the freedom I had so desperately sought, but it was now I who preferred the sanctuary of our home. In the suffocating silence of our house, I began to fathom the depth of my mother's fears. But nothing could have prepared me for the raw shock I felt when, roused by her anguished scream, I stepped outside to witness a scene I'd thought impossible. Zoe stood there, flanked by 2 police officers and an unfamiliar couple. The resemblance was uncanny. The photos scattered around our house were a testament to that. And yet she bore the weight of years she should never have lost. My mother's reaction was visceral. The sight of her long-lost daughter caused her to crumble into unconsciousness. As we awaited the doctor's arrival to tend to her, questions swirled in my mind. Where had Zoe been? Who were these strangers accompanying her? And how, after all these years, had she found her way back? The officers settled into our living room, the weight of the story they were about to unfold palpable in the air. One of them began, detailing a harrowing operation they'd recently dismantled. They had caught a gang involved in a grotesque trade, abducting children and selling them to childless families. To my horror, my father was among the culprits. It felt like a sick twist in a gut-wrenching thriller. My father, blinded by avarice, had traded his own daughter like an expendable commodity. My emotions ranged from disbelief to fury. I tried to comprehend the depths of his betrayal, but words failed me. The unfamiliar couple turned out to be allies, not adversaries. They were close to the family who'd purchased Zoe, ignorant of her true origins. Tragedy had cut short their tenure as her guardians. They perished in an accident. And now, here they were, returning Zoe to where she truly belonged. As we listened to this inconceivable tale, I caught my mother's face, etched in raw emotion. She was a tapestry of relief, sorrow, and anger. She didn't need every detail. The reunion was what mattered most. In the midst of this turmoil, Zoe, at just 7, was thrust into a world she could hardly understand. While challenges lay ahead, she was finally where she belonged. Can you even fathom a story like this? It sounds straight out of a dramatic film, but it's my life. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whirlwind of events. If you found this gripping, please do like this video and subscribe for more compelling tales.